What is up, you guys? Welcome back to Twink Revolution. I'm Sam.
And I'm Gian. And we're joined by Mila, returning guest. Mila from the Unacceptable Pod. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. How are you?
We're doing good. Yeah, we were just saying before this, we've been doing we thought we'd just do something really light and fluffy this time, just like there's really nothing
heavy. And you called me.
Yeah, there's nothing heavy going on. We're just gonna take it easy. It's just fun-filled, laugh-filled episode. So Lebanon.
Let's talk about a very contentious political region. Yeah.
Obviously, the enormous blast in the port of Beirut. Many dead, many thousands injured, and then that's bad enough. That would be enough for the world to be horrified. But then there's a sort of second order reaction that's been going on online, right? About where should you give your money and who's to blame?
Yes.
Please help us
you out.
Help us out here. What am I to think?
The who's to blame discourse has actually been ridiculous. I try not to be too mad online, but the last few days, it was so strange to me because I woke up and then I saw my phone was like blowing up with texts about what had happened. Everyone's like, is your family okay? They are, thankfully, but yeah. And then I log onto Twitter and right away, the first thing I see is Ken Roth, who's the director of Human Rights Watch. I call him enemy of the pod for not because I oppose human rights, obviously, but that's not really what he's getting at there.
Very specific version of human rights.
Yeah. Like this very peak neolib kind of ordeal. So right away, Ken Roth is speculating, being like, okay, this is Hezbollah, whatever. And so I was like, okay, this is how it's going to be. Everyone's going to blame whatever political group they don't want. And the U.S. in particular has sought regime change in Lebanon since 2002. So they will really latch on to just about anything, especially also when tensions in Iran are heightened. This was very much, I think, an act of political negligence. So basically, like the backstory was that there was a ship that contained over 2,000 tons of ammonium nitrate. And so the owner docked the ship and he actually refused to pay his workers, which is, that kind of stuff is always left out of Middle East analysis, as I was telling Sam. There's, and so lawyers eventually came, they released the workers, but they just kind of left all the ammonium nitrate there. That's been there since 2013. It was just sitting there. No one stored it properly. No one took the precautions, and everyone kind of knew this. Apparently there were also fireworks stored next door as well, which is extremely stupid, but not surprising to me. And so the ruling elite in Lebanon, I think, is very negligent. If you look at the garbage crisis, this is just another instance of this.
I'm not familiar with the garbage crisis.
So the garbage crisis, basically they don't have like proper government garbage collection. So there's actually garbage on the streets everywhere. There were protests about it and about government corruption in 2015. But of course, people just kind of projected their sectarian narratives onto those as well. But yeah, so there's a garbage crisis. It was funny because I was at one of those libertarian events like years ago, and I remember talking about it. And I was like, the government in Lebanon is so incompetent, they can't even pick up the trash. And all the libertarians, they were like, that's awesome.
Yeah, good, awesome, cool. This is the state of collapse we want.
Yeah, I'm like, if you want to look at what libertarianism or like unfettered neoliberalism looks like, I think like Lebanon is the perfect place to look at for this kind of problem. And I think, this crisis right now, everyone's blaming it on the political sect they don't like, aka the religious sect. So like Hezbollah, for the most part in Western media, but also Hezbollah will likely place the blame on other political actors as well. And I think, they're going to be obscuring the class nature as usual in Middle Eastern politics and in worldwide politics, which is that these ruling elites, I'll always remember this lesson that my dad told me. And he's like, the rule in Lebanon is après moi le déluge, for like after me comes the flood, where like, these people, they don't care about what happens to anyone else. It's kind of like, I got mine, too bad for you. We have there are people in the government who have billions of dollars in Swiss banks. There was the document release, which kind of propelled the uprisings a few months ago, that were revealing that like all of these, they revealed the amount that each politician had in Swiss bank accounts. And it was just absolutely insane.
Were they tied up in the Panama Papers or whatever? Or is it yet
I'm
another
sure
version?
They were,
yeah.
But this was like another thing.
Okay, well.
And yeah, no, it just doesn't stop. And so you have these like, they're incredibly corrupt. And the narrative that you usually see in the media here is kind of like, oh, well, Christians and Muslims are fighting, and they've always been fighting, and they've been fighting forever, and stuff like that, which really obscures what's really going on here. And so I really think that this blast, there were a lot of conspiracy theories, and
yes, some people were rather animated by the idea that Israel had nuked Beirut, I think, very early on.
Yeah, there was definitely that. And like, I understand it because from what I hear from people I know on the ground in Beirut, like they see Israeli planes all the time. Israel's always invading Lebanese airspace. And so I was like, okay, guys, we should not speculate or make a conspiracy theory yet, but I understood it, I guess. But then, yeah, what you see on Twitter then is, then I saw all these like woke Israeli posts of people accusing Lebanese people of being bigoted and racist for suspecting Israel in this role. And that just pissed me off, because then I was like, and I try not to get mad at this like woke virtue signaling that I see on Twitter all the time. But this was like, I was just like, how can you accuse people who have literally been occupied and bombed by you of being racist for suspecting you?
Yeah, why would there be any ill will there? I can't imagine why there might be some mistrust, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think, the blast was absolutely horrible, and it's going to be so bad for everybody, because already the economy has been in collapse. So there's that problem already. Then there's going to be political scapegoating as well. They've placed most people who are like in any sort of in charge of anything at the port on house arrest already. And some of them have actually been taken to jail. I suspect that some people will just be scapegoated.
Yeah.
And like just average dudes. And I think that, there will still be like very silly, and again, like there will be analysis that obscures the true nature of this, which is just this utter negligence of elites and their after me comes the flood kind of mentality.
It's fascinating I had not heard that there was a labor dispute. It's only funny because like, if you look back through the history of sort of the worst industrial accidents, which this kind of is, I mean, it fits into that category. I'm reminded of things like there's the Texas City refinery explosion, which was one of the worst sort of big like explosions in an oil refinery. I think one of the worst industrial accidents in the U.S. Like, what does it turn out? There's some horrible labor dispute going on that meant that like people were not able to do their jobs safely. And so maybe not to directly play into a speculation on cause, but it is interesting, right? That like turns out
sounds
badly
so
mistreating
class
workers.
Reductionist.
It turns out badly mistreating workers can lead to some horrible things for more than just the workers involved.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's definitely, and I think especially in Middle East politics, we always see an obscuring of this problem. The Arab Spring, which I mean, it's fun. I wrote my thesis on the Arab Spring and I called it the Arab Spring and whatever. But I think like even the name and the way that it's positioned as this unique event is also really obscuring the other sort of labor uprisings that existed in places like Egypt beforehand. And, you know, they made it sound like all the Arabs just woke up at once. And and we're like, actually, we want democracy. When factory workers had engaged in uprisings in Egypt years beforehand. So I think yet again, you know, they're always trying to obscure the nature of these political problems, and they're going to do that in Lebanon as well by making this out to be a sectarian issue, a religious issue. I'm sure. I try not to listen to Mike Pompeo or U.S. Commentary on this, but I'm sure they've blamed Iran already. So
I find the funny part is seeing all the Israeli media, like the IDF and Middle East analysts who were like IDF soldiers during the 2006 invasion of Lebanon. And it's like, like, oh, we're going to offer support. And it's like, we should blame the government and we should like do all these things. And you even see like Macron being like begged by people to come back and take over
and
for like 10 years.
Recolonize. Yeah. That's the stuff I find to be the funniest, because like the sort of connection with France and the sort of import of neoliberalism that has come from France, it totally underlies these kinds of crises that Lebanon keeps facing. And it also permits this sectarianism to happen. Like, whereas people kind of think it's, you know, the primitive sectarian Arabs on one side and like noble civil France on the other side, you know, that this neoliberal austerity politics that takes place in Lebanon really helps sectarianism to thrive. If you can't access free healthcare, which most people can't, and some political party comes along and says, oh, well, you're my religion, I'm going to provide for you, I'm going to provide healthcare for you. This is what makes sectarianism thrive, essentially. And so it's all kind of connected to these kinds of politics that someone like Macron supports.
Yeah.
So it's ridiculous.
Wasn't the Lebanese government structure like where different religious and ethnic groups were guaranteed a spot? That was created by France, right? To keep sectarian stuff. Am I correct?
Yeah. And so now people are also trying to impose that on Iraq right now, like in post-war Iraq. But it's extremely silly. Yeah. So basically your place in politics and your citizenship and whatever is very determined by your religious positionality. For me, it's really funny. So my citizenship card says I'm Muslim. And like, I haven't been to a mosque in years, and I've never practiced the religion. I'm like full heathen.
Wait, what? On this podcast? Cut her mic. How did we miss this in our background check?
Yeah, I'm not a Salafi. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, so it's just it's a very outdated way of organizing people, and I think it just reinforces and creates a politics of difference rather than creating a sort of united citizenry, because essentially you're just told to identify with, and it's crazy because then when you identify with a certain sect, that also places you with like one foreign power as well. That's also like your dad on that. Like Iran's the daddy of the Shias, and like, and then like Saudis for the Sunnis, and France for the Maronites and whatever. And so, yeah, you just end up with a very fragmented politics that also really dovetails very nicely with the sort of individualist neoliberal logic as well. Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, I feel like, I'm straying into some class reductionism here. I mean, so many of the actual, the loss of a vocabulary for talking about class antagonisms in the US and in many sort of Western, like global North nations, right? Is to usually use some sort of like ethnic or racial chauvinism to mask or to obscure class antagonisms, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel? I mean, do you feel like it is the same structure, and like the way we see it reported here is just people deliberately misunderstanding that there's a lot more going on, or is that? Do you think how people actually living in Lebanon are also sort of not seeing the forest for the trees on this one?
Yeah. So I think that like there's a lot of people who genuinely do believe in or feel sectarian feelings and whatever. Like, I don't think that this class nature of it is apparent to everybody. And I think that's like the ruling elites kind of have incentives to play that up as well. And so you have like these people who are at the centers of power that kind of exploit sectarianism and exacerbate it as well. There are different TV channels for different sects, for instance, which, I mean, I guess in the US you have stuff like Fox News for the right wingers and MSNBC for the libs or whatever. And in Lebanon, it's like this, but with your sect. So I think, you have that, and that kind of does impact the way that people think. But yeah, I think also that in Western media, there's an incentive to overplay that part as well, overplay sectarianism and underplay class antagonisms. Because I mean, 50% of Lebanese people, I think about, not exact number, but approximately live under the poverty line. And again, like there is some of the most extreme austerity, lack of social safety nets, and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely an incentive for both ruling elites who want to see austerity happen and for elites here to portray this as like this ancient religious hatred, where it's like they've just been fighting forever. That's what they always say. That's like the Thomas Friedman line, I think. So
France, like clearly, I know I've read a little bit, it was big into that austerity, and I know they were trying to push a year or two ago, like more austerity measures in Lebanon to control the economy. Do like the people in Lebanon view France still as an imperial power? Because I think most people don't, but it seems like they do in a lot of countries we don't think about in the US.
Yeah, so I think there are different groups of people who think different things.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a consensus on France. I think there are people who are nostalgic for France. I think a lot of the people nostalgic for France haven't actually lived through French rule, though. Like, there's a lot of people our age who are nostalgic for it. And I think they just want to seem like French, and fashionable and Parisian or whatever, and not be seen as an Arab. And I think, that's also kind of a consequence of this like war on terror culture as well, right? They want to kind of separate themselves from that. And I think also there's a nostalgia for it because of how far away it's been. Similarly, there are people who are nostalgic for the Ottomans as well. There's a petition for the French to reoccupy. There's also one for the Ottomans.
Oh my God.
And that's what I mean by like every sect also has like this foreign power that's supposed to like sweep in and save them. And it's very silly, and in my opinion also undignified. Like, I saw this video of Mia Khalifa like begging France to come reoccupy, and I was like, this is so undignified. Everyone's mad at you for the hijab porn. Like, that's nothing compared to this.
Wait, is she Lebanese?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a song about her, right? For like about all of her porn, and people like shaming her for doing that because she was being a dick to them as well.
No, I didn't know there was a song.
It was a TikTok song for quite a while.
Wow.
Yeah.
So obviously, there is rubble on the ground. There are people under rubble. It's a horrible situation that many people around the world are seeing flash up on their TVs and want to do something. But there's a bunch of discourse about what the correct way to do it. I couldn't find the tweet again. I was trying to dig it out, but there was some blue check mark, insufferable blue check mark being all like, do not give your money to charities which are just going to funnel to the corrupt authoritarian government. And like, you should actually be giving money to this group. But like, there's been some back and forth. And so like, I'm curious what your take is.
Yeah, well, so I think this is funny to me because corrupt is a very good way to describe the Lebanese government. Authoritarian, I'm not sure. I don't even think they have it. I don't think they have it in them to be authoritarian. Like, I feel like they just care about like getting their profits, and that's that. Like, they don't have this desire to impose anything on the population. They just like, they are just fully motivated by this like individualist profit motive. The Hariri family, they're businessmen. Like that's how they are, right? So I don't think, it's going to go towards exercising tyranny, but I think what it can do is go towards just go into the pockets of these billionaires. So that is definitely a valid concern. I've actually been wondering too, like, what is the best way to go about it? I know a lot of people I know are donating to the Lebanese Red Cross, but I know the Red Cross also has its problems as well. So I wish I had an answer to that. I think like donating directly to people there is helpful, but that's also like dependent on whether you know people there or not. Like for us, it's like, okay, we can support our family that's there. But it's a bit harder when it's, through these organizations. There was one that I linked where they said they were going to be giving evidence of how they spend their money. But yeah, I can DM that, but that's about it.
We'll add it in the episode description at least.
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of these things where it is inevitable, and it's not a problem unique to Lebanon or the Middle East that our sort of model of like capitalist philanthropy as our way of fixing every problem. Yeah, turns out there's some limitations there, and there might be some people trying to make a buck. Weird, that, right?
Well, it's like the Fukushima disaster. They were like funneling money to like the Japanese mafia and like whaling ships and stuff.
Really?
Yeah, it's like they used it to funnel money towards whaling ships to fight like the eco-activists. I'm like, Japan's not called an authoritarian, like corrupt state, even though like they're run by like the worst people.
It's because there's too many weebs over here. They don't want to they don't want to talk crap about Japan. They're like,
uncritical support for Japan.
Yeah, they're like, that's where I get my hentai from. Yeah. I'm not gonna. That's not gonna happen. But yeah, no, I think that's definitely a concern. And I mean, I was thinking about this today actually, because I was listening to your episode I think this was a few weeks ago now, where you were talking about how the left has kind of been overtaken by anarchists and like anarcho-liberal logic.
Yeah.
And I think that's very true. And that's kind of penetrated the ideas of like redistribution as well, with like the rise of things like mutual aid as being this like leftist thing. You know, you see all these like pastel Instagram graphics, like give mutual aid to so-and-so. And it just becomes part of this like individualist neoliberal imaginary where it's like whoever can make the case the best for it.
Right. It's your GoFundMe. It's how to do a compelling GoFundMe. And that's how we should distribute our attention and our resources.
Exactly. So it's like a competitive market forces kind of thing. So yeah, there's always going to be flaws with these nonprofits, and especially when it comes to Lebanon, I'm sure there's no, even like the UN, I'm not sure if I trust them. I almost worked for them in the Middle East actually, and then I turned it down because they were like, we're not paying you.
What?
They're like, yeah, come work for us in Jordan. Oh. And I was like, okay, cool. I guess I could spend a year in Jordan.
Yeah.
And then they were like, yeah, but you have to pay for everything. I'm thinking, like, you have to pay for everything, and plus it's like an unpaid internship.
Oh.
Which is
Do you get one of those
insane.
blue passports though? The like fancy UN passports? Because
I don't know. At least they should at least give that as a consolation prize.
I mean, those would look good on the gram at least. Like,
yeah, exactly. And I'm like, who works these jobs? Like, who can afford to work these jobs? And then that should give you an idea of the kind of people who are working in this nonprofit NGO industry on the ground. It's people who can like essentially who are out of touch enough to be able to,
somebody having no income and doing international travel for a year and paying your own way. That's just totally within reach of all the normal people. Well, that's
yeah, and the pundit class is so awful in Middle East. And like, I mean, we were talking about this on our show and we had Ben Norton on as well because they're awful in Latin America and China and whatever. But yeah, like the responses that I saw from people, some of them like deleted it, and I'm glad that they did. I think Ken Roth deleted his as well. Is this cancel culture?
Silencing dissenting voices.
I'm trying to silence the dissenting voice of the U.S. State Department. Whoops.
Yeah, we need to center State Department voices in the conversation.
Where's J.K. Rowling now to silence people or to save these people from being silenced?
Yeah.
I know, right? Include female drone operators in your activism.
So you had Ben Norton on, I think it was 2 episodes, right?
Yeah, that was great fun.
Do you get a lot of hate for that? He's like a Duganist or something like that, and that's bald.
I don't know what he gets accused of crazy things.
Everything. Everything under the sun, I've heard it said of him.
Yeah, and the thing about Ben is like he's very well read and he's very into what he does. I don't think he has any malicious intent in him at all. I think he's just very, like, sometimes he speaks really strongly about things. And I think he just feels really strongly about what he's doing. And his goal is to stop warmongering, which is a very noble goal. I don't think he deserves the hate that he gets. We got a few messages just being like, really, Ben Norton? And like, I was just like, yeah.
We had
really.
Anna Ketchian on last week. You can imagine what our DMs look like.
That was an excellent episode, though. I really enjoyed it.
We denounce it. We're very sorry we did it. We repudiate Sorry.
On our podcast, we stan Anna too, so it's fine.
So I did think it was interesting. He's a figure of controversy, and you had him on. The only thing I thought it was interesting that you just let him sort of say unchallenged is that jazz is good. I think that's kind of weird that you just
how dare I
platform that opinion.
So this is really funny because like we talked for about 20 minutes before starting the podcast because him and Ken just got into it on jazz because Ken has something against jazz and I think he tried to push back. But yeah, Ben is very hard to argue with. Like he knows everything about everything. So but yeah, I think I had a soft spot for jazz because I played in a jazz band for a bit. But as I noted on the show, I also was a bit bitter about jazz band because I had to play with the brush drumsticks, which really upset me. So I felt like a little bit defanged, but yeah, that was definitely the most controversial part of our episode for sure.
No, it was really great to hear him in conversation with you guys, and I highly recommend people go check out the Unacceptable podcast. You have a Twitter now as well for the pod, right? Yeah,
we finally made a Twitter, but Ken's really intent on staying off social media.
Right.
He's too pure for this world, I think. But yeah, we made a Twitter. We have this sort of we want to get like really weird roundtables on our podcast. So we want one with like Anna and we haven't asked anyone. We're just like, we want one with Anna, Eric Weinstein, Joe Rogan, and John Frusciante. That's like, so we're like, maybe we can achieve this through Twitter.
Flea, Amy Therese, and the guy that voiced Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street.
Yeah, perfect. Right. Yeah, and then we'll have like you guys and Anthony Kiedis.
Yeah, I'm seeing a theme. These aren't weird roundtables. It's just the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
And Peter Thiel, of course, as well.
Perfect. Great.
I heard you're like giving your blood to him or something.
That's how we're funding the podcast.
That's
and the
how
magazine.
You're funding I actually had no idea who he was at all.
Yeah. Really?
Lucky you. Yeah.
The libertarians love him. Like everyone.
Yeah, I never heard of him.
I see people like in when I was in the Coke program, when I first moved into my nonprofit job, and I'd go 3 times a year to DC with all the others in the program, and he'd be like, "Oh, I'm reading Peter Thiel's book. It's really great." And I'm like, I've heard really bad things from him in the Bay Area.
Well, to be clear, I will defend the honor of the book. Only say I don't know if he wrote it. I assume he actually did. It's actually a good book in the same way that something like The Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged is sort of like a good book if you ignore the political content of it. And if you just simply say, okay, there's something kind of, what he's it's an encomium to the virtues of kind of those who innovate and those who take, make something from nothing. And there is something kind of marvelous about that. And he writes about it very eloquently. And so it's a perfectly nice read. Then you just have to sort of go through the whiplash of reconciling what he's written in the book with what he is in the world.
Yeah, I'm ashamed to say I know very little about him. I know like Eric Weinstein works for him. I think I've listened to a few of Weinstein's live streams because my co-host really likes him. But yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah,
and
PayPal is basically his claim to fame.
Oh, see, I thought that was Elon Musk.
Well, it was the two of them, basically. Yeah. Yes, they both made lots of money. Elon went off and started making cars and rocket ships. Peter Thiel went off and became like a finance venture capitalist. And does that sort of stuff. And Palantir as well. Peter Thiel was very involved in the founding of that. The key innovation of which was to be able to do a sort of algorithmic name matching of Arab names.
Oh,
you imagine the fact that that's how that got them all their contracts was, they're really good at that, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Very strange.
Cool, huh?
I wonder if he's came up with my last name before. It's a bit of a more difficult one, so you never know.
Yeah, no, you might be safe from the algorithm. Not the Twitter algorithm.
Yeah, they're all going to be like Al Jihad or something. Like these really exaggerated.
Yes, yeah, I'm sure it gives some, everyone is Osama bin Laden. It's weird. Yeah. All those names just match. We're doing science.
Well, the podcast purge just begun. They're going after the TrueAnon host Brace Belden was on like some State Department list because of like
really,
yeah. So I'm like, it's begun.
Well, he went and fought with the YPG.
Yeah.
The record.
Oh, okay. Damn. So he's really gonna get hated by everyone then. Turkey, the Assyrians. Poor guy.
And there's no bigger hater than podcast listeners.
Yeah.
So.
That's the worst kind. And they banned some subreddits recently too. They banned Cumtown and
Chapo, I think.
Did they ban the Chapo?
I think the Chapo one went.
Yeah, the Red Scare one's fine.
Red Scare one survived somehow.
Yeah, that's good.
Happy to report that the Twink Revolution subreddit is still safe.
Oh, you guys have a subreddit.
It's very quiet.
20 people.
we like to go stalk it occasionally, but there's not much on it.
Yeah, I don't spend a lot of time on Reddit. My co-host Ken seems to spend a lot of time on it, probably because he doesn't have other social media. But whenever I go on it, I spend enough time on it. I went on the Red Scare one yesterday because I saw this like autism post trending, and Ken and I were talking about it. And they had this post about like culturally appropriating autism or something. And I was laughing so hard. I was like, this is like a new level of the cultural appropriation. This guy was saying that women appropriate autism or something. And I was like, oh my God. I was thinking of those like clapping memes, like stop culturally appropriating autism.
I've been seeing a lot of that on the TikTok app of gay guys and like lesbians and stuff, and like their straight allies calling out the like TikTok boys doing like wearing like short shorts,
gay
and,
baiting,
like doing like the limp wrists and stuff like that. And like, this is appropriating gay culture, and it's not fair. Like, you all get to like do all of this when we were bullied for wearing short shorts, and it's like, is this really what we're gonna?
Just shut up and thirst. Like, don't. Just say thank you. Do not look a gift horse in the mouth.
Oh my god. Yeah. There's I TikTok's being banned though, right? In the States?
I think
Or
it
is
got
that not
paused for a
happening?
bit.
Okay.
It was, I mean, who knows? That was, Trump bombastic, whatever. And I think Microsoft's trying to buy the US arm of it or something to
Yeah.
save it.
Well, there's a new one.
So that everyone worships Microsoft now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems like very convenient.
I saw like in 40 days, every company that doesn't cut ties with it's going to be sanctioned by the U.S. government.
Oh my
So-
god.
This is how you piss off Gen Z. It's not actually like making them starve in the streets. It's getting rid of their TikTok straps.
This will be the beginning of the revolution.
Yeah, well, they're gonna get a taste of what it's like to be in like Iran.
Yep.
So
The,
there you go.
they're all going to become neocons. They'll be like, we must
no.
liberate the youth of Iran so that they may have TikTok. That's the
Well, did you guys see that video with the banana?
oh god.
Oh, yeah.
Like-
Did I see the banana? Yeah. And only as a lead into this, I've got to say that the most embarrassing person from my homeland is God, his name's escaping me.
Italy or
He's
New
known
Zealand?
As, New Zealand. His name is he's known as the banana guy because in the sort of age of like the new atheists or whatever, he was one of these like super weird evangelical like young Earth creationist guys. He's from New Zealand, lives in
Love
the
it.
US, and he would produce these bizarre videos about how the banana was an example of intelligent design because it fits perfectly in the hand and in the mouth, and it's sort of a very like
I've heard
phallic
of that.
fellatio. Yeah, and so there's it was widely mocked at the time, but yeah, he's a New Zealander.
Is that William Lane Craig? Is
No,
that who it
that's
is?
but it's
No,
like a
okay.
buddy of his. Ray Comfort is his name.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he's pals around with Kirk Cameron as well. So I feel like the banana as a sort of device for just bizarre reactionary thoughts. I'm coming to suspect bananas are counter-revolutionary.
Do they-
is where I'm going with this.
Maybe you might have a point. I actually stopped eating them because I had a terrible experience with it. When before quarantine, when we actually drove to our workplaces and stuff, I would go to the gym before work. So I'd wake up at like 5 and then go. And I would eat a banana like as a pre-workout thing.
Yeah.
And so it would still be dark and I was driving to the gym. And so I couldn't really see it well. And I bit into it and it was like super bruised and disgusting. I literally almost threw up in my car while I was driving to the gym on my lap. And I haven't had a banana since.
Well,
Yeah, that's why I stopped going to darkroom glory holes too.
So we're anti-banana, anti-glory hole.
Yeah, we're
Same kind of vibe.
2020. We're getting rid of fake friends.
Yeah, exactly. The banana is my fake friend.
It's just
kind of
evidence
failed.
that we need to sanction Canada because he didn't know what type of banana to properly eat.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was bruised. I didn't know it was.
Yeah, look at this poor Canadian girl who doesn't know how to eat a banana correctly.
It must be the mullahs of Canada.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you want to explain the video a little bit? Because I feel like I'm
yeah.
extremely online, so I saw it, but maybe not everyone had the pleasure.
There was like a pro-regime change account, and like that account is absurd. I've seen it a few times, and there was like this. It's like a pro-Iran regime change thing, and there was a kid struggling to open a banana, and the tweet was kind of like, oh, this child doesn't even know what a banana is. Like, I weep for my country, Iran, or whatever. And Iran is actually one of the biggest exporters of fruit. They have pretty great fruit supply. So it was kind of a really terrible lie. I think the tweets actually have been taken down. And I think it attests to how ridiculous a lot of regime change propaganda is. It's so stupid. They kind of expect the person reading it to be gullible and stupid. It's like why isn't anyone talking about this industrial complex kind of thing?
Well, I also felt like it speaks to something about like the loss of a culture of just bullying children.
Mm-hmm.
Because the problem is, right, when confronted with this video of a child struggling to open a banana, and admittedly he was not very old, he was
Like
maybe
2.
5. No, do you think he was like?
No, he was like 2
let's
years
call him
old.
under 5, whatever. Doesn't matter.
Banana gate. Yeah.
Kids struggling to open a banana. We're banana truthers. But whatever. So the thing is, you could either just sit back and laugh at him at his misfortune and bully him for being dumb. Like, haha, you don't know how to do a banana. Or you can say, let's invade Iran. And I know which of those two I'd prefer. I think bullying children is funny, enjoyable.
See, kids are so soft nowadays. When they don't know how to open a banana, we just say invade Iran.
Yeah, exactly.
And instead of teaching them how, or instead of laughing at them,
inflicting a deep psychological wound. Just do that. Like if we would just get comfortable with the fact that we just do that as a default option.
I feel so bad for all the LGBT children today where they're not bullied and they're just going to have full confidence. And I'm not going to, how do we connect if you don't have deep emotional trauma from your childhood? Like, how are you going to move on?
How do you even exist in the world?
I can't even picture that because I went to Catholic school. And like one of my biggest memories was when we were learning about why being gay was a sin and whatever in my class. And the teacher made us all go around and say like what percentage of Canada we think is gay.
And 98%.
He was trying to make a point that it's not common enough for us to be like concerned with gay rights, I guess. Like it was a weird point. And this one guy in the class who was gay was like 60%. And the teacher just flipped out.
All right, we're invading Canada. Fuck it. Either way, but if we find this guy, we go mock him for something he said as a child, or we invade Canada. Well, sorry, these are your options.
Plot twist, he was also my ex-boyfriend.
Aww. When he was gay or before?
No, I was, I think, one of the last women he dated. And then he was like, yeah, actually, I'm gay. Now he's a fashion designer and he has a hot boyfriend. He's thriving.
Living his best life.
He's living his best life. I'm glad I could help him come to that.
Wait, sorry, this was a co-ed Catholic school?
Yeah.
What the fuck? This is the Pope would not approve, frankly. Resist temptation. Look what having girls and boys mixing in Catholic school did to this poor boy. He's now been led into mortal sin.
But that's the thing. Like I had a friend who she went to an all girls Catholic school because her parents didn't want her to be distracted by boys, but she was a lesbian. So she was actually really stoked about it.
Yeah, no, I think yes, they'd never quite put a lot of thought into the edge cases of the single sex schools.
They don't. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's fine. I mean, for the women maybe, but I don't know. I don't know if you put just a bunch of dudes in one school, what'll happen.
That's just really gay. That's like
fellas, is it gay to learn with other men? I'm like dredging up a factoid from deep in my memory, but I there's something about like I think it's boys do much better in single sex schools in terms of their like academic achievement or whatever, but girls do worse.
Interesting.
And so it's I could have that backwards or whatever, but it is one of these weird things where you sort of maybe start to see that the sexual mores of all of this is like whatever. They always build girls and boys like single sex schools next to each other anyway.
Yeah,
so
that's
don't worry. There's
strange.
plenty of covert teenage sex still going on. Plenty of room for debauchery and sin. But but it is one of these things where it's like, oh yes, we'll have girls in our school because it will help the boys academically succeed or whatever.
Oh my god.
Well, this explains Iran and why like 60% of like STEM fields are like women. While in America,
and why 60% of Canadians are gay.
Yeah.
There you go. It all adds up. That's perfect. How many do we know about how much bananas we import here to Canada?
So many,
I don't know. I should probably figure that out.
For the Iran banana video, I was like, I shared a guy like deep throating the banana. I'm like, see, the gays don't know how to eat bananas either. Or
everyone else has been eating them wrong the entire time.
Yeah,
Right.
because I hear, I mean, I went to Catholic school, so I don't know about this, but I know in sex ed and non-Catholic schools, they show you how to put a condom on. So they use a banana, right? Or is it a cucumber?
I never saw it.
My high school did this, but they had a what is euphemistically called a condom demonstrator. They were made out of wood. and the charming name of Mr.
We all know what that was used for.
Well, no, it's the things that were wooden, and they were they had charming name Mr. Remu. Remu is a native timber in New Zealand. It's a name of a tree.
Oh dear.
Yeah, and they were carved
Is that
condom demonstrators.
colonialist?
I don't know what it was. It was deeply distressing to me as a 14, 15-year-old.
It's the
I was already awkward, and then you make me sort of sit around with this going on. I was just mortified, honestly.
Yeah, no, Catholic sex ed is really weird. Like one of my religion teachers brought in his wife. Actually, two of them brought in their wives to talk about like family planning without using contraceptives. So they gave us like these. You guys will never have to worry about
the rhythm method. Is that where we're going?
It's almost the rhythm method, but it's a little bit more advanced.
Oh,
and so like it
Catholic
shows
rhythm
you,
method.
yeah, and they show you how to like measure your fluids and stuff.
Oh my god!
And I'm like, I can't believe you
Got her
brought
mic,
in your
Sam.
wife.
Can you get that
to Anyway, yeah. So
that is. Unfortunately, I'm just all I can think of as you say that is it's the Monty Python, the meaning of life or whatever, where they do the like it's the boys' school and the strict head teacher of this boys' boarding school brings in his wife and they just start having sex in front of the class.
Oh my god!
It's all like, pay attention, Jenkins.
Yeah. I mean, one of my teachers brought in his wife and she like taught us how to be trad.
Oh,
like she was like,
did she teach you how to be cottagecore?
Yeah. Essentially, it was.
Ladies,
kind of
here's
like,
how you get the best angle for your Instagram. So your flowy white dress.
Yeah, for your perfect cottagecore. I actually didn't really know what that was until I listened to your last episode.
Neither did we, as you could tell.
Yeah,
and neither did Anna. None of us knew what it was.
Really
Sam did his research, but didn't really shed any light on it.
Yeah, I mean, didn't even know. I mean, I guess I live in a city, so I never see cottages or whatever.
I don't think the people who are cottagecore have seen a lot of cottages either.
That's true. Yeah,
they're all city Instagram girls and like trying to like go into nature and reconnect in their pure white outfits and be like, oh, I've never stained this, and then he just fall and trip and it's like skid their knee and are just covered in mud. It's like, I don't like it anymore.
No, I said it last night. There's a lot more fucking spiders than I was expecting as in my journey to become cottagecore. I was not expecting to have to deal with quite so many like very like gross big spiders.
Yeah, that makes it unpleasant enough, I think.
Yeah.
Does anything grow in Canada? Can we talk about gardening for a minute, Mila?
Yeah.
What are you gardening?
So right now I do not garden. And in one of my old apartments in Montreal, one of my roommates did all the gardening and it was really awesome. And then the landlord ripped everything out.
And that's how you become a Maoist.
Yeah.
you behead my plant, I'll behead you in return.
Well, so we had neighbors that like complained about us growing stuff. I don't know why they complained. I think our neighbors just didn't like us.
It's too loud. Those crops are too loud.
The crops are they didn't know how to eat a banana, and so the neighbor called for regime change in our garden.
Fuckers.
But yeah, that was like the closest I've been to gardening. But one of my grandfather's brother, who now lives here as well, he's really into gardening because like they grew up in Zahli in Lebanon, where like they grew so many different things. Like my grandfather used to work in the wine fields where he would like crush grapes and stuff, and very cute and very cottagecore.
Yeah.
No cottages in Zahli. Just checkpoints. No. but
Checkpoint.
But yeah, checkpoint. But yeah, I mean, so he grows really nice tomatoes and plums.
Nice.
But yeah,
this is gonna be like the most bougie thing I think I've ever said. So I've got to sample several wines that can only be kind of described as like conflict wines.
Interesting.
So I'm trying to remember. I think it was there's a bunch of like Lebanese very old growth wine vines. that I guess due to conflict, unrest, invasion, were not harvested for several years. And so there's this they were talked about in whispered mythical tones because there's these vintages where they're like, this was the first time they went back and made wine after several years of not really being able to, or disruption or whatever. And Syria has similar things. There's Syrian rosé that like just didn't get harvested for, I kind of think it was like three years or something, because this, it was in the middle of a conflict zone and things like that. So that's my connection to, that's how I show solidarity with the oppressed peoples of the Middle East, is by drinking the wine after their countries are decimated by invasion.
By your sanctions, there you go.
But you can buy Syrian wine.
Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
I mean, I don't know if I can buy it.
I'll grab some for you guys next time. I'll bring it back.
Yeah,
no, my grandfather actually makes wine here. And so it's like, I guess technically Lebanese wine, but it's made here. But yeah, no, I mean, the area that my mom's family's from, it's like the wine capital. Like when you enter the city, there's a statue of the goddess of wine, and it's close to Syria.
Nice.
So I wonder if it's like,
I think it's that whole region just
area.
Has good grape growing.
Really good wine. I think it's the first place I ever like got drunk.
Wait, what do you mean? I thought all alcohol was illegal. How would you be able to? This is the entire
in
Middle
Lebanon,
East.
like
No
nothing's
alcohol.
illegal. Yeah, it's really funny because like there's a stereotype too. I mean, among Arab nations, I feel like there's a stereotype of like Lebanese people being too liberal or whatever. But yeah, no, you can definitely drink. There's also been these weird pictures. It's like Lebanon before Hezbollah, and it's like women in short skirts and stuff. And it's like, I've been there when Hezbollah was, predominant as well. And it's like, people are still hoeing out. So I'm kind of, I was confused. Like,
right. We're gonna get Thomas Friedman to go ride
maybe
around
he
measuring.
can explain it to me.
Well, he can measure skirt lengths. Or wait, was it David French who was doing his like millennial grip strength surveys?
Oh my God, no, what's that? I haven't heard of that.
Apparently young men's like grip strength has declined compared to like their forebearers, and this says something about, I don't know how you're measuring it.
Well, they're all gay now.
Cue the jerk off.
I was gonna say that sounds like a twink revolution.
It does. But but I wonder whether you could sort of have a similar, like, we just get sort of a good a pundit or a journalist to go and just measure skirt lengths in Lebanon, and if they start to get any longer, we must invade at once.
Oh my God. Well, it's so weird because I mean, I've never been like pro veiling ever. But I find like the policies in France to be so weird where like, they go to the beach, and if the women are too covered, they get in trouble.
Yeah. Hoe out more, ladies.
Yeah. Well, I'm like, are the French cops just really horny?
Yeah, they absolutely are.
I'm like, this can't just be a secularism thing.
At some point there's sexual pathology involved.
It's weird. Yeah, I thought it's weird. So
Yeah,
what is with like always like Afghanistan and like Iran and like Lebanon and stuff? They always mention women's skirts and be like, they were so short. And it's like, well, you know what? We're America. We're gonna make it so no one wears skirts, and that's how short they are. Like, just really,
we're going just the Winnie the Pooh look for everybody, folks. We're doing t-shirts, no bottoms.
I'm wondering if it's going to be like, because I was saying like regime change propaganda gets more and more ridiculous, right? And so like now is it going to be like, oh my God, there's not enough OnlyFans accounts in Lebanon or Iran, like time to overthrow
we should pull the
government.
stats.
Yeah, I mean like now it's just about, I mean, before I was like, okay, it's just maybe people are like, they're not sufficiently liberal enough, which is stupid enough. But then when you see like the banana stuff, and then you're like, wow, that's even further. Because there was stuff, I mean, I think around last year, or maybe before that, there was all this stuff about, okay, Israel has a pride parade. and the rest of the, I think Sam, you wrote about this on your website, but yeah, like they have a big pride parade, and no other Middle Eastern countries have a pride parade, and so like therefore they're the best.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
yeah.
I think we should. What we need to do is go start finding all the homosexuals and ensure they're having enough gay sex.
Yeah,
we need to spy on them. Like I'm thinking, spy cameras, secret police. We must verify there's enough gay sex going on.
Oh, so like the Iran law, but like make it mandatory.
But in reverse, yeah. So we've got to make sure, because if there's not, we need to know who these damned gays are, and we need to make sure they are fucking.
Do you know about that in Iran? Like you need to have 4 witnesses, and they all need to testify why they didn't stop the couple from having gay sex. So like
I actually didn't know about that.
No one gets prosecuted because like you have to like confess you're also guilty by watching gay people have sex.
Oh my god. Yeah. That's I know that they pay for you if you want to transition there, which is like is odd.
It's like the second most in the world after Thailand.
Yeah, it's wild. I don't know. It's funny. I mean, I was thinking a lot about this, like this idea of like, I feel like a lot of leftists and liberals kind of went from this universalism where like everyone deserves the same amount of like dignity and rights and stuff to like, if you're not sufficiently liberal enough or leftist enough or whatever, then like you don't deserve what we deserve kind of things. And it's not just with the Middle East where I see this. I kind of see it observing US stuff too, where like I think it was fucking Neera Tanden or whatever her name is, and she was friend of the pod, and she was talking about coronavirus cases, increasing in the south of the US, and it's like, oh well, they're like, conservative. Yeah, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like you're using like weird biblical plague language, like oh they're not worshiping enough, they're gonna get a plague. But I do think, like, I do see this logic with, the pro-war lobby and with regime change logic as well. Like, I'm like, okay, are you going to go and interview Lebanese people and see who supports abolishing the police or whatever the next liberal trend is?
Yeah, abolish police in Damascus. That'll really work really well.
It's just ISIS is like the new police force.
That's fine. Yeah. No, I do think you make an interesting point there, that like the kind of universal idea of like even the like it's the kind of truly enlightened liberal notion of like a kind of universality of like everyone gets to live their version of their best life or whatever, they get to seek their own happiness, has been replaced by like no you have to do it properly. And I feel like some of the label, the trad label is thrown around, including I think in our direction, which is hilarious if you know how we live. But
twink revolution is trad.
So
now.
trad.
I'm a little bit confused.
But only because I think we'll speak in defense of those whose version of a good life is not a life I would want to live at all. Maybe we are the true liberals.
We're the libertarians infiltrating that we've been talking about.
No, but I mean, it's like it's to the extent that if some people really want strict social structures and a lot of religion and very long skirts or whatever, like cool, as long as it's sort of making you happy, like as long as that's your version of a good life or a fulfilled life, then that should be fine. But that's not enough, right? I mean, we must sneer at those people for not having sufficiently been inculcated into our version of what a good life means.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, even though toleration is seen as like a liberal value, I think it's also important for leftists to not try and like police what each individual wants to do with their life as well. Like our project is not, or at least it shouldn't be, about policing people's personal lifestyles. Like I like to do so. I like to work out every day, but like I'm not going to, which I'm
against, and that's why we're invading Canada.
And I'm opposed to bananas now. No, but I like we all have things that we like to do. We all have habits that we like to do, and some people have traditional habits, whatever, that's fine. But I think it's actually a very anti-leftist project to drop the sort of universalism in favor of, this moralist thing where like if you're part of the moral good ones or whatever that is, or if you're morally enlightened enough, then you're deserving of these programs.
It's moral means testing. That's like it's neoliberal means testing, but it is but on weird culture war shit.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is also these culture wars, they're so volatile. They're so subject to change based on like certain whims and whatever. And I'm so certain that, in many years to come, there will be things that we think are really okay that might not be. One of the things I think is maybe like eating meat, but I don't know. We'll see. But there's always things that we don't know, or that might be subject to change when we morally reevaluate how we feel or what we think. So our political program can't rely on these things. It can't rely on personal moral convictions. I think that's where a lot of my views come from, is like we can't make our programs rely on this sort of what you're saying moral means testing.
Yeah, I think it was you that shared like an article you wrote about pro-life groups and like the misconceptions on the like pro-choice crowd and like their interpretations. Do you want to like explain what that was about?
Yeah, sure. So like I said, I went to Catholic school and I spent a lot of time around these like pro-life people. And I was thinking a lot about, I was thinking also because I observed the Democrat primary race, and I remember Tulsi Gabbard. So she said she was personally pro-life, but politically pro-choice. And I mean, I think a lot of people were just looking for excuses to attack Tulsi on multiple fronts. Because I think anti-war candidates do threaten a lot of people's, But yeah, so I wrote this piece, which I put up on my blog yesterday, because I've noticed there's been a sort of, there's a way that progressives address pro-lifers that I think is kind of misguided. And I don't think it's necessarily anyone's fault. I think it's just, if you don't grow up in that environment, you don't understand it. I think also, this can also even hinder a leftist political project. Ben Norton has made this point about people who are pro-life in like Latin America who are like dismissed as these like moral savages or whatever, even if they're like principled leftists, by like these liberal elites. So yeah, I mean, I personally support not criminalizing abortion, obviously, but my point in writing this article or this blog post, whatever, was to try and show people how pro-life people think, because I think the predominant sort of way of addressing pro-life arguments is through what's called hypocrisy baiting. So basically,
I think that's all of kind of liberal left politics.
Yeah, unfortunately, which I really am not a fan of, because it relies on assuming the other's internal logic, which I kind of talked about in the blog post. So, I was saying, okay, but like this is not how these people see these things. So when you try to hypocrisy bait, you're assuming their internal ethical system. That's so funny. Like, instead of "did you just assume my gender," it's like, "did you just assume my internal ethical system?" But yeah, I think there's an issue there, right? So I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna lay this out. This is how these, like, when I spent time in I mean, I don't think I was ever like super hardcore pro-life, but I was around I went to a March for Life before. I worked for, like, I was a service student for a teacher who was
I think we learned, sorry, just as an aside, while we were in DC, I think I learned that March for Life is where you go to find all the sort of very, very like well-groomed teens. they put a lot of effort into their appearance. I was like, what is this? And it became clear. I now would know how to spot them from a mile away. So I assume you were like, you were wearing your Sunday best to go to the March for Life.
Yeah, I was in my high school uniform, my Catholic school uniform, and I was told I got to miss school for a day, so I was in.
I was suddenly very animated by this cause.
Yeah, no, but yeah. So I mean, I think that they have a fundamentally flawed logic because I am an atheist and a materialist, but that, like, the way that I wrote this was not to argue for my point of view. I was just like, look, if you're gonna try and engage with these people, you cannot try and hypocrisy bait, because it doesn't work that way. So I kind of went through some of the major arguments, and I was like, this is how they see this issue. So if you want to engage in it in this way, you have to view it in this way, and so on. Because I think a lot of issues right now in political discourses, we're all like talking past each other. So
yeah, it seems like so much of the, like, primarily like the anarcho left are ready to dismiss anyone. Like, I know, like, Ortega in Nicaragua has been like, he needs to be removed because abortion's illegal there, or like Elizabeth Brunig in the US gets tons of hate, even though she's like, oh, I don't think the state should be involved, but like personally I'm against it. And you're like, she's a horrible person, she's a Nazi. Like,
I cannot imagine what
someone called her a Nazi.
Oh yeah,
of course, yeah.
Oh my
having
God.
opinions is the first sign of National Socialism.
Oh right.
I mean, this is the. I've always. I've never.
Gwen Snydered for this.
Hell yeah, we are. It's okay. I'm sure we're already on a short list.
Great.
This is a pipeline.
Oh no, there was someone sent me actually in my DMs a list of like all the problematic leftist Twitter. And it was like everyone.
It's everyone
like,
we follow.
We were all
friends.
excluded. And
we weren't in there. We felt
I
really
saw
left out.
that list, and there was like Joe Rogan on it, which made me laugh.
Yeah.
Like Andrew Yang.
But yeah, I mean, I'm personally, pro easy access to abortion for those who want them. But I can't imagine what position you would want your political opponents to take that was more mild and amenable to your position than, I don't like this, I don't think anyone should get them, but I'm not going to stop you. That is surely like the ideal opponent.
I know. That's exactly what sort of my issue was. And even in the article at the end, I was like, okay, look, here are some materialist views that I think are good arguments against abortion, versus in contrast to the ones I laid out here. And yeah, I mean, I just think, when you're dealing with these debates, because this debate's obviously not going away, even in Canada, where our reproductive rights are a little bit more robust than they are in the US, we're still having these debates. And so I'm like, at least you can interpret these arguments correctly and charitably. And maybe I'm just being like ridiculous and pedantic or whatever, but like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just bored and I'm like, I have to write a blog post about this. But
well, that is an interesting point, and one thing I would love to kind of ask you about. I do feel like talking about discourse is always dumb, but there's something about the fact that like much of the world that exists on Twitter or whatever have just been like locked in their homes or living a sort of weird shadow existence for months and months now. I feel like the world is not well. The world of discourse, I mean, is not well. Like the online is not well. How are you feeling about the world of our discourse? We want temperature check on the discourse.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking a lot about this since that like letter came out, that Harper's letter or whatever.
Yeah.
Because there were some people who I really respected that supported it, and some people who signed on to it that I was like, oh my God. And then I was thinking like, this game is not for us, like this is not for the average person. It's not for the average podcaster or whatever. It's for these, like, it's just a battle among these like liberal elites, just like clawing for more attention. And I was thinking a lot about also this like cancel discourse, and about how it's almost like, there's an incentive to exaggerate how much you're canceled in a way, because like it makes you look more dangerous. And when you're in this sort of economy where everyone's scrambling for resources, the more you stand out, the better. But then obviously there's like levels to that, right? Because you don't want to seem too canceled where like, the mere sight of your name makes people go, oh my God, you can't talk about them.
Right.
Or whatever. But
See
there's
our
like
previous guests.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note too, I think, what Anna had said about them, like leftist women in particular, or Marxist women in particular, being under fire for that. Like, I totally believe that. I think that is very accurate. But yeah, like they're not in an enviable position, but I think there's like a sweet spot that some liberal elites are in right now, like J.K. Rowling, who, like they're not canceled enough for like the important people.
Right. She still sells a lot of books. Like Harry Potter is still on the shelves.
Yeah, exactly. But she's still like she still kind of seems now more dangerous because she pushed back against like one niche leftist narrative. And so I think, that's a favorable position to be in.
Right. The anti-intellectual dark web.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know. I think one issue I see all the time is that people just don't want to hear each other out charitably.
Yes.
And I think that's a big source of the problem as well. But I do think that the economy really does make it difficult for, like, it makes it so that people also want to exaggerate their positions in the discourse as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm so dangerous,
Right. And it's considered nerdy and weird to actually kind of just do full engagement with other people's ideas and not try and sensationalize it. I think I got a rather pointed Dave Rubin. I got like
you got called Dave Rubin
with a Dave Rubin thing because I had said like, hey, like we're not trying to do oppositional debate podcasting with our guests. It's like instead we'll have like a bunch of people on. They're all gonna have very different views, and that's like much more interesting to have a longitudinal conversation. And apparently that's Dave Rubin logic. I'm
my God.
Isn't that cool? I'm happy to report that we're going to have Mike Pompeo on the pod next week to just counteract everything you've said.
Everything I've said? Yeah,
you gotta
my
really,
opposite.
Gotta see all sides,
Or West Bappen.
Which, yeah.
But I do think with Dave Rubin, I think, he's a perfect example of someone who I think has the incentive to look more dangerous and canceled, because I don't think he's very intellectually well thought out.
No, he's not intellectually honest or rigorous.
Yeah, exactly. Or, yeah, he's not rigorous. I joke because we both have political science degrees. And I'm like, see, you can be a dumbass and have a political science degree. No, but yeah, like I think, with him, it's kind of what makes him seem more important than he is, because none of his ideas are new or interesting, is the fact that, if he markets himself as dangerous, then he looks more dangerous. And I think a lot of people have that incentive.
Right.
It's not just a left-wing or right-wing thing. I think it's just a feature of a competitive market economy.
Right. And people give it a lot of credence, right? I mean, in terms of they buy into it. They take the bait.
Mm-hmm.
I don't regard Dave Rubin as dangerous. I think he's just kind of boring and stupid. I mean, he's kind of insipid.
Did you guys see his new book, what it was called? It's titled Don't Burn This Book by Dave Rubin.
Yeah, I saw it. That's exactly what I mean, though, right? Like, you want to make yourself seem, like, oh my God, your ideas are so dangerous.
Right, it implies anybody might have ever thought of doing so. I guarantee they didn't. It's don't pulp this book after it doesn't sell.
Oh yeah, like it sold horribly, and he was like, "This is because of cancel culture."
Yeah, and so I don't know. It's annoying to me because I definitely think there's a problem with canceling, and I think a lot of leftists do try to do this thing where they say this person said one thing bad, and that says something about their whole moral character, and now we're just going to dismiss them forever.
We love essentialism on the left. That's our main sport.
Yeah, well, that's what I think it is. It's a fundamentally essentialist practice. And so I think, that is definitely worthy of critique. But I think at the same time, there are definitely people who want to sort of use this for their own ends. And I think that's an issue. So.
What was the deal with Barry Weiss when she was on the Harper's letter? She quit New York Times a week later. Wasn't it
I'm too dangerous for this publication?
Because she was I
hear Barry Weiss. I'm I need another glass of wine.
Yeah, please get a refill.
Wait, is Barry Weiss a lesbian? So I think it was
I don't
know. I don't think
it was sexism or some kind of charge against.
I don't
New
think
York
I'd
Times.
bang, but no.
No, I thought she wasn't it that her colleagues didn't like her? I thought she was getting workplace bullied for being too damned centrist or whatever.
Imagine not being liked by the New York Times writer.
It's so funny to me because of all the issues, and I think the left here has also been silly about the New York Times because it's of all the things that the New York Times has done, the New York Times has been manufacturing consent for war for so long. And then they published this thing by Tom Cotton, who's basically saying what a lot of Americans think, even though it is disturbing.
Sure.
And everyone is kind of oh my God.
This is beyond the pale.
This is beyond the pale.
In section A3, it's, the legitimately elected government of any country we don't like should be removed at once.
Yeah, and I'm this is what America's doing all over the world right now. But yeah, Weiss, she is, as soon as I saw her involved in the letter, and I also was reading about how Glenn Greenwald was excluded from it.
He got cancel cultured out of the cancel culture letter.
Yeah, which is insane. I mean, but yeah, if you look at how she spent university trying to get Joseph Mossad fired. And she again, there's this big victim complex that's going on that I do see a lot now. And again, now I'm am I going to get canceled for this? But a lot
not on this podcast.
Yeah, we've had way worse.
Nobody listens this far, and if they're just here to hate, if they're just here to be censorious, they're not listening this far.
Good. No, but I do think there's this new wave of this pro-Israel center that is kind of I call it uwu Zionism, that's kind of I'm a small poor being, protect me, and they kind of use anti-oppressive discourse and stuff like that. And I think I saw a commentary being New York Times fired an LGBT woman or whatever over this, and it's the same thing as that Pride Parade discourse.
Right. Yeah. Have you noticed that I noticed this famous the Hindu nationalists of India are taking on all the rhetoric of oppression Israel does, and now they have the new term Hindu phobia. There was a very funny...
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I didn't hear about that.
It's been emerging. They're they just hate us for our culture. And it's no, we hate you because you're invading Kashmir and killing Muslim people.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is very fascinating. There's a concept, I think, among the Hindutva crowd called love jihad.
I don't know what it is, but I'm signing on now.
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Well, so it's a conspiracy theory that Muslims are dating Hindu people to convert them.
Oh.
and so my yes. So I'm this is just getting it's almost absurd, these world powers, they come up with some absurd shit. But yeah, I hadn't heard about using the Israel rhetoric, but I'm not surprised. They're friends.
I've had this sort of thought brewing because I honestly I feel cancel culture is now such a meme, and it kind of obscures so much of we end up talking about multiple things and calling it cancel culture. I think that the most direct one, which I think is just a cultural critique, is around just a kind of a culture of censoriousness, right? To say, to kind of like clutch your pearls when you hear an opinion, which you've actually heard 1,000 times before, but somebody said it in the wrong tone of voice. They said at a time you didn't want to hear it, whatever. And like just the actual, a culture of sort of robust disagreement gets lost. And this is, I'm going to get tagged in Dave Rubin gifts again for saying that. But like, I genuinely think we need to be a little bit more like powerful, right? We should regard ourselves a little stronger. And as like, us, if we think we're going to be the revolutionary vanguard with our AK-47s and our pickup trucks or whatever, then like we should probably not run crying to the teacher every time somebody uses a bad word, or like
okay, well, this is something that really gets to me, is that, you know, there are people who are running to the bosses of like these major corporations to fight culture war battles, you know, like just trying to get people fired for stuff,
right? Which that seems to be the actual cancellation is material.
And so that to me is like utter insanity. And I was saying this today because I was talking to another leftist who people were trying to get fired from his job for like talking shit about Elizabeth Warren online. And, you know, I was thinking like any kind of self-proclaimed leftist that is trying to take away someone's like secure livelihood is doing leftism wrong, or at least socialism wrong.
I think I'm on the record, and I've just repeated this joke several times, but I'm gonna say it again because I don't think I've said it on the pod. Is if anybody gets me fired from my job, I'm gonna go work for the Heritage Foundation and roll out mass austerity programs to everyone, just eviscerate the working class to hit back at my haters. So,
oh my God,
if you want that on your conscience,
everyone be careful.
Yeah, you better believe I'm that vindictive. Do not, you know. You'd much rather I can just do this.
I think, you know, one thing is we're really not accounting for power relations at all. So it's like if an average person says something that's like off color or whatever, people can't differentiate like that, and then like a political official being like, let's sanction this poor country, you know,
right.
so they like, and I don't know if this is kind of like postmodernism or speech act theory gone too far.
I was gonna say speech acts, so I'm glad you said it.
Well, because I think, you know, in politics and political theory, especially, there's this big revolution of speech act theory where it's like, wow, yeah, speech can constitute action. And so like words can constitute acts of discrimination or whatever, prejudice.
Literal violence.
But then you get to this leap of like speech can be equal to violence. And then that obscures, you know, like the differences between an ordinary person saying something stupid online and like someone that actually holds material power saying something that has material consequences. And so, I think, you know, that is an issue, obviously.
Yeah.
It's very funny. All the people I feel like of that liberal left milieu who are like really like against the cancel culture are all the ones who are like, oh, I'm going to support the BDS laws and like the US restrict people, or like they're the big Hong Kong people where like people who just side with the wrong side just get set on fire. And it's like, is that the Chinese, like the Hong Kong version of cancel culture? Just like arson?
No, definitely. And I think, it's always about like your political team.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And the BDS stuff is a perfect example. And I was recently listening to Ali Abunimah on Useful Idiots. And he was talking about this and how, because like Matt had asked him, okay, well, do you feel like the liberalization of speech is going away? Like, do you feel like culture has become more censorious? And Ali was like, I mean, Palestinians have never been afforded free speech. Like, it's never been the case.
Right.
Like, we've never had it and had it taken away. It's just never been there for us.
Right.
And that kind of struck me too, because like this discourse is really like there's so many assumptions behind it of like who is the person whose free speech is being removed, and why was it there to be like, was it there to begin with, and what about the people who didn't have it there to begin with? And you'll see that most of the time that is Palestinian activists.
Yeah, I mean it's and that's I think where a term like cancel culture obfuscates too much of. Are we talking about powerful people who say are in media jobs finding that they are not able to hang on to those media jobs for shit they say or whatever, or opinions they hold, where their job is to produce opinions, and those opinions are not selling in the marketplace anymore. They're not getting canceled. They're just actually getting like horrible market logic applied to their thinking. Versus, say, yes, a Palestinian who has no running water and has never had a single skirt of political power. They are not canceled, but in a literal sense, you will never hear their opinion. So,
and when you do, they're just labeled as bigots, right? Like it's kind of, I think it's really dependent on, and what you're saying too about this is it is a market logic, right? Like cancel culture is a market ideology. And it's funny to me when I see these like pro-capitalist or liberal ideologues kind of pushing the anti-cancel culture narrative, because they never really have any solutions. That's kind of my issues, because I'm like, okay, yeah, let's end at-will employment then. Yeah. And then it's like, well, no, companies should have the right to fire who they want, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, what's your solution?
How much at-will employment is there in Canada?
I don't like. We have not bad protections.
You need to like just cause to get rid of somebody.
Yeah.
Right. It's amazing to me. Even American leftists and a lot of American sort of self-described socialists have just fully internalized the idea that you can just be dropped from a job for no reason. I'm like, this is not normal, people. This is unusual.
Yeah, but I think in universities it is sadly very, like if you look at the case of like Steven Saleta, for instance, they will find ways to drop you.
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that case. Who's Steven Saleta?
Oh my God, it's insane. And what's crazy is about this Harper letter is a lot of people that signed it supported firing Steven Saleta. So Professor Steven Saleta, he's a Palestinian scholar. And he got hired in this tenure track position. And then, because he's Palestinian, when Gaza was being bombed in 2014, he had some emotional tweets about it. His tweets were deemed anti-Semitic, and there were calls to fire him. And they uncovered emails from private email server. He got Hillary Clinton essentially.
Emails.
Yeah. So they uncovered private emails, and then the emails were people conspiring to get him fired.
Wow.
And so they fired him, and now he works as a bus driver. And he has a really great post called An Honest Living, where he talks about his transition from being a prof to a bus driver. But yeah, it's really tragic because, you know, in theory you have these labor protections, but then in practice, you know, if people want to get rid of you, they can get rid of you. And yeah, so when I have these arguments about, you know, whatever, cancel culture, and if you're arguing about it with a liberal, their solution is basically to like wag your finger at the culture and be like, stop canceling.
Right. It's just these
people.
Bad ideas in our heads that are,
that's
all that's perpetuating
exactly.
this. Yeah.
Like they don't have a material solution. It's just whining in like mainstream papers being like, boohoo, woe is me.
Yeah.
There's also like a deep hypocrisy from so much of like the free speech cancel culture warriors, which is like the libertarian right, is to like be like, oh, like for like TPUSA, they have a list of like professors and teachers who say problematic things, and
that's so funny.
A watch list for them, which is like very Orwellian.
Yeah.
Or like
neo-Marxist, postmodernist.
You see all the libertarians be like, I believe corporations can do whatever they want. But once like Twitter or Facebook starts banning them, it's like, oh, well, I don't want you to do this. And it's like, well, you get one way or the other. Like
philosophy for children, partially, but
Yeah, well, exactly. It boils down to like, do you buy into this free market logic or not?
right.
And this is a consequence of that. And I do think also this desire to like push people out fully, like get people out of the discourse fully, is part of that free market logic as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely, because it is a marketplace of ideas, and you are trying to encourage a consumer boycott of the content.
Yeah.
There's no desire for sort of robust debate. And I know it's like debate nerd shit to even think that's a healthy or good thing. And I think I'm actually ambivalent to the idea of robust debate. It's merely that like I don't like the idea that people's material security is so tied to shit they say in the course of prosecuting, what they think is a political discussion. I do think everyone should be able to participate in a political discussion, even if they're very wrong.
Well, also it's very dehumanized, because in the case of Saleta, Professor Saleta, he, this is something he's personally involved in. He's tweeting emotionally about his homeland being bombed.
Yeah.
Right. And similarly with this case, to bring it back to Lebanon, you had people, maybe some of them were tweeting silly things about Israel and conspiracy theories about Israel, but, people are in a very emotional state. And so to take these sort of like these things and the tweets of people and be like, yeah, that's it, this is what's going to get there, like ruin their career for life, I think is kind of sociopathic.
Well, and it's part of a logic that has turned us all into content producers. And so the problem is we apply the same standard to I don't know, Thomas Friedman says a lot of dumb shit and has made a career just of like reported speech of Palestinian taxi drivers or whatever. and like, it's just inane and dumb and stupid. And I'd be happy if I never had to read any of it ever again. But it turns out like some rando tweeting about something that affects them personally, into which they're having an emotional response. I mean, there is a difference in kind here, but what we've done is erase that. Seems that we are all inputs to the content curation algorithm, and actually your speech and Thomas Friedman's speech, or fucking David Frum or whatever, like anybody trying to drum up consent for war or something like that. These are all just equivalent, and therefore the sort of the consequences of them are the same. The cost to you for saying these things should be the same. It's like, well, no, that's they're different in kind. We are still like kind of private individuals in some sense, and clearly all three of us have podcasts, and it's funny
so we get to say what we want.
No cancel culture here.
Cancel culture free zone.
But whatever, you self-publish a podcast listened to by a small number of people, and this is going to sound terribly self-pitying, but it does sort of suddenly place you into playing with the big boys, as it were. You're much more accountable to what you say, and you cop a lot of shit for it. But it is different from maybe some random professor tweeting about his homeland being bombed.
Well, it's very, I mean, like, I think a lot of people, it's very abstract to them, right? Like if they're seeing, like even, when people look at the port of Lebanon in Beirut exploding, like they don't feel emotionally connected to that in the same way that like Beirutis will feel. And so it's impossible for them to understand it. But my co-host, Ken, he has this theory that he talks about metabolic efficiency, where he thinks that like essentially, it's more metabolically efficient to write people off through like vague like cultural signs, or like if they're saying something problematic or whatever, then they just get written off, because he thinks, like he was saying, okay, well, it's more like people just view that as more efficient. Obviously it's a problem. Right. I don't know what to think about that. I think because I mean, you see a lot, not just on part of powerful actors, but if you go on Twitter, for instance, you see like a lot of major people who just tweet screenshots of undesirables.
Oh yeah.
Being like, I can't believe they said this. And, you know.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is like people don't even intend necessarily to cancel someone when they do that. What happens is like people want to vent their frustrations, and other people pile on, and then eventually it just happens.
Right. And I feel like one has to keep in perspective, and given that, we've been subject to some of this, not much, thankfully, but I'm sure it'll come, like, don't worry. But the, that is not strictly a form of violence, although I do think it's kind of shitty bully behavior.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But like, okay, it's kind of understandable, but it's mostly about people trying to work up to a set of just like internal behavioral norms to a community. They're trying to get in with a group of people whose way of using Twitter is that. That's how you be one of the cool kids within that community. In the same way that, like, if you were on weird Twitter in 2014 or whatever, you were just doing weird Dadaist jokes constantly, and that's how you got in with that crew. And I'm sure if you're in like regime change Twitter, you just have to like come up with the most outrageous explanation for a child not being able to open a banana, and that's how you become one of the cool kids there. It's how you get the the squirts of validation and good brain juices from all the likes and retweets.
Well, yeah, there's sets of orthodoxy, and like I think I was talking to Sam about this before, like there's Syria and sex work. Like, these are two things where it's like you have to toe the party line, or like that's it, like you're done. And I'm sure there are other things too. These are things that I've kind of observed. And you don't want to be blacklisted. You don't want to be called a dictator lover or whatever the fuck is, like, what else is there? Tanky.
Dick lover. Good. Dictator lover.
Sadist.
Very bad.
Yeah.
Banana hater, whatever it is. And so, you have an incentive to censor yourself. And I feel like I've definitely censored myself because I had one pile on against me about Syria. And since then, I've just been like, I'm not going to bother because I don't want these weirdos coming at me people for being like, Al-Qaeda shouldn't govern.
People think I'm being arch about my obsession with gardening and the fact that I pretty much only tweet about gardening now. but it is genuinely a response to, like, I just don't want to be piled on. And it turns out gardening Twitter,
it's tiring.
Amazing. Gardening Twitter, so friendly. They're so nice. There's no way to be wrong on that. Like, if you fuck up and you put exactly the wrong type of fertilizer on your tomatoes, and you post a photo of it and try,
you're canceled.
No, they're like, oh, hey man, it's okay. Next season, you'll get it right next time.
I'm gonna be like, look at this young twink in America who doesn't know how to put fertilizer on
quote tweeting screenshots.
Tomatoes. we need regime change.
Yeah,
now.
the rock phosphate to ammonium nitrate pipeline.
I'm gonna write to Justin Trudeau.
Did you guys see the Novara piece where they said it's good to side with the Western imperialists? It was around like the Uyghur situation. I think I shared it, and like whenever I share anything about China and like saying we shouldn't sanction them or shouldn't, like, I don't know, go to war with China, everyone's just like, well, you're a genocide denier. And I'm like, I didn't say anything about any of this. Like, I don't know what's going on. I didn't take a vacation to like the region. Like, but you get like left media being like, oh, it's good to side with the State Department. They're always very truthful on like everything.
Yeah, no, and this is why I call it like the why isn't anyone doing anything about this industrial complex? Although that's not very catchy. I need to come up with something different. But
I love it.
but I do think that's kind of, and we don't have a lot of information. Like, we just straight up don't. We have like small sample sizes of interviews. And, I think it is good to, I said this today on Twitter too, like, it doesn't help your cause to exaggerate information.
Yeah.
It actually does help your cause to be skeptical of information. But I do think it's funny that they were kind of just like, fuck it, mask off, side with the imperialists. As if the US has ever had Muslim interests in mind, which is hilarious to me. Like,
right.
And I think though, now this idea of like war against Muslims is dying out, partly because of China, but also because the war on terror rhetoric has went a bit stale.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying this before that I think, now it's going to be Russia and China.
Yeah.
I think liberals think it's more socially acceptable to be like racist against Russia and China than Muslims.
Yeah, I might push back a little bit because I noticed, at least for China and Russia, the regions of like Chechnya and the Uyghur region are the regions of focus, it seems, of like, and so often like it, like for the Novara piece, they never mentioned all of the terrorist attacks by like Salafi like Uyghurs in the region.
Right.
And I'm like it's the same with like Syria, where like to mention like, in Idlib it's run by Salafis instead of like freedom fighters, like that makes you siding with like the big bad government.
One man's freedom fighter is another one's
Terrorist.
pre-justification for war.
Yeah. No, and I mean also I think I said this the last time I was on too, is just like the concerns of Middle Eastern Christians are seen as like right wing to Western liberals, and so you're never gonna see like people care as much about things like this in areas that are run by Salafis. But yeah, I don't know. Do you see Majid Nawaz just had this really big apology against Muslims, which
I saw you posted that.
Funny.
No, I haven't. He does not turn up in my life very often these days. He was there for a while. I mean, I would be interested in your perspective, because I have not followed anything he said for years, but I do feel like he didn't quite get a fair hearing, and it pushed him straight into the arms of essentially a kind of gross center right, like a neocon center right, where and I don't know, maybe it kind of goes back to the idea that like the stakes of being wrong should be a little lower. As in he was clearly one of these people who was very, very sort of like sincere, well-intentioned, processing a lot of, a changing worldview very quickly. And many of his ideas were sort of evolving in the open. And
the Gray Zone, they have like a report on this. And a lot of the stuff, I don't know what to believe, but they kind of showed a lot of like holes in his account of what had happened.
Really, I've not followed enough of it, as I say.
But these like born again, like when you stay as like an extremist and then you just suddenly are like, yeah, actually now I'm a humanist, I denounce my extremism, I'm always a little bit skeptical.
Why give it up? Come on. You gotta fix and rational, like internally consistent worldview. Why give that up?
So yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I saw his post today about being like, I'm sorry to the Muslim community, and like the Uyghur thing has opened my mind. And then he started sharing all this stuff about China's state media and
but that kind of checks out, right? Because I mean, to say that he was somebody, and I have no current information on him, and so I don't know what the fuck he's been up to. But like, at least my reading of it at the time is he by having some harsh criticisms or simply repudiating some of his former positions, he fell foul of a kind of like great white savior Western liberal orthodoxy around what he could and could not say, and he got put on like the SPLC hate watch list.
Yeah, that was stupid. Right, SPLC is ridiculous.
Oh, of course they are. But and somebody like Ayaan Hirsi Ali as well, you would say was somebody who honestly had she maybe been just treated a little bit better by sincere liberals who were going, this is somebody processing actual trauma. Like this is somebody who is literally dealing with a lot. And not just her treatment directly at the hands of her countrymen, and then the murder of her collaborator in the streets of Amsterdam with a note, pinned to his chest with a knife saying "You're next."
Yeah.
You could see why that might like get you to say some things out of anger and things like that. But the problem is that the people who were willing to eat that shit up were right wingers. So what did she do? She fell in with a bunch of neocon weirdos who were happy to have her let her say anything, and then you end up adopting that orthodoxy because the problem is she was canceled from day one. she was saying mean things about Muslims, and that's just not okay. It's like, well, she was a Muslim, and she's trying to talk about her experience, like, and so maybe this is kind of getting back to our cancel culture, but like, honestly, you know, are we doing? I think we're doing harm to our own cause.
Yeah, I fully agree with that.
I'd rather take somebody who's kind of wrong, like just kind of wrong around the edges, and let them figure that out together, and say like, hey, actually, here's another way to look at that. Like maybe invading in Middle Eastern countries is not what we need to do in response, but maybe like we can actually take a humanistic or a sympathetic approach to this. But we don't. We write them off. She's just a Nazi.
Well, it seems
I think the problem is like these guys feed off each other, right? Like the post 9/11, there's like this industry of like, I think these like fucking extremist Muslims, and then there's also these like neocons, and I think they really feed off each other. They both kind of require each other to exist, right? And so like the problem is I think a lot of leftists kind of don't know how to handle that, and they don't know how to handle, you know, they see this neocon anti-Muslim rhetoric, and then they see you know, these people who leave Islam denouncing Islam, and then they associate that denouncement with the neocons and whatever, which I think obviously is a mistake. But yeah, it's hard to manage, right? Because like, especially if they're difficult, or if they left like, I think Ayan and Majid have different cases.
Very different, yeah.
I think if you're leaving an extremist group, I'm a little bit more wary, but I don't know. But I do think, people are very unfair to these people for sure. Even though like I don't agree with everything they say.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, it just seems like the left's inability to even fully understand these like complicated issues. Like I've seen a lot of Yazidi women who've been like, oh, we need intervention, but like that's only the right wing in the US are talking about it. Like it is a real issue, but the left would rather just ignore all of this.
Right. We don't have a positive case for what we would actually do to show real solidarity, to take care of or like to regard as sincere the interests of people who feel they've been injured by the world and the complexity of the world. And we don't do any. We have no nuance to offer. It's just you get sorted into essentially like and it is along the lines of U.S. party politics. It's not even a fucking ideological struggle. It's expressing it through two parties of capital. And you're like, wait, are you red flavor or blue flavor? Fuck, that sounds like something red flavor says. Bad. Do not want to talk to you. You go in the trash pile, garbage human. Like, it is absurd. Yeah. It's absurd. Yeah. We are shooting ourselves in the foot for not just having a better like, oh, hey, I can sort of hear, I will read past the exact words you're using and the tone of voice you're using and sort of hear what you're really trying to say and say, oh, okay, cool. Like, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
But we don't do that. It's fine. We just write people off, and then they go into the hands of a very well-funded right-wing talking points machine.
No, it's true. And it's wild because it's like, how are you... I feel like a lot of the left, they kind of expect people to move to their positions really quickly. Like leftist orthodoxy kind of changes really fast. And then like they just, like if you don't jump ship right away, they're like,
you've got to also go back in time and have good opinions. Yeah. So you have to go apologize for tweets you made when you were 9 years old or whatever.
Yeah, I'm so glad I didn't have Twitter in high school. But yeah, you know, there's kind of an expectation where it's like, oh my God, like suddenly you don't believe this. And like, it's like, you know, someone might not even have read about it or whatever. Like if you don't properly just jump on board with everything right away, which is not a good approach. You know, I think it's like I was saying before, like, I think we need to de-emphasize individual moral opinions and more like emphasize universal programs.
Yeah, being right is something we value far too much. It turns out nobody's right, and we're all like figuring shit out in the open because unfortunately we have a sort of direct tap into each other's brains in the form of social media.
Twitter, yeah. Well, that's the thing too, is like, and some of these are obscure philosophical issues. Like we're talking about things like gender ontology and like and
we
like
are all
abortion.
socialized. Yeah, we're socialized in very specific ways. It takes a lot of time to learn about the world, to reason your way through it. And to expect perfection from every person you meet immediately is bizarre. It's not to regard them as fully human.
Well, also the left's caught in like a historical debate that's like these things already happened, it doesn't really matter anymore, versus like, at least in the US, no one really wants to talk about American like socialism or like Canadian socialism. It's like, oh, was the tanks in Hungary good or not? And it's like, who cares? Like,
extremely good.
Or like they'll focus on other countries far more than they care about their own. Like a lot of like the Juche kids will care about like North Korea, and I'm like, you're never moving there. Like, worry about your own country. Build socialism in your own country, guys. Like,
I do have to say though, is I do think some socialists are making a mistake by not being concerned with imperialism. Because I do think that, and Lenin was really spot on about this, in my opinion, as my username.
Yes. Lenin was right. Is the username. That's great.
But I think he was very spot on in his analysis of imperialism, where he's saying like it basically creates divisions among the working class of each nation, because it essentially makes like the suffering of like the third world in the interest of the workers in the first world.
Right.
And so it deletes the possibility of genuine solidarity.
right.
And so I do think it should be a concern of the American left and the Canadian left and so on. I don't think it needs to be an elitist cosmopolitan issue. It can very much be a matter of, like, our suffering is your suffering.
Well, that's exactly it. It's the decoupling of a concern for imperialism as a sort of foreign policy wonkery.
Yes, exactly.
Separate from your concern for domestic issues and pursuing, a polite program of social democracy.
Yeah.
And like Bernie liberalism at home. It has to be connected. It's an interlinked struggle.
Yeah, I'm like, look, I'm not like a woke lib. I just don't want like the fam to be bombed. Like, is that so much to ask?
Right.
Jesus.
And we should regard the exercise of power that looks like bombs from high altitude anywhere with great skepticism. The burden of proof is on those who want to drop fuel air bombs onto poor people across the world, right? And that. But the problem is to internalize the logic and say, actually, there's good reasons one might want to do that. And we're just going to assume the default position is those who say that's a bad thing to do have the burden of proof. It's not true. Because honestly, like if history were a little different, it'd be us being bombed. And we wouldn't like that very much either.
Not great, yeah. Well, and also, like these wars, they're in the service of capital, right? Like this, so this very much is a leftist issue. Like this is an issue of monopoly capital. And so, I mean, it is something that is, even if you're not connected to the Middle East or to Latin America or to China or whatever, I think, it is a worthy issue. And I think it is actually inseparable from dealing with capitalism at home, because capitalism at home never stays at home anyway, as Lenin had said. Like
highest stage, baby.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It expands. So I do think there's a sort of attempt by some leftists and some liberals to portray concern with foreign policy as like something that's like bougie or elite, just because a lot of foreign policy freaks are of that disposition.
Right.
But I do think it is very necessary for the left to have an anti-war contingent.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
I've actually had like quite a few like Lebanese and like Syrian diaspora message me, and they're like, "Are you Arabic?" And I'm because like I post about stuff, and I'm like, no, I just care about like the country is my country's Bami. Like, like
honorary.
Yeah.
we'll send you some food.
Yeah, get that man some dates.
Yeah, dates.
Some non-Sabra hummus.
We're coming up on 2 hours, which I think is the longest.
Time flies.
Yeah, longest podcast we've ever done. We're reaching
Cheers.
Joe Rogan levels of podcasting too hard here. How do people find you, Mila? Where do they see more of you?
Yeah, I don't know if it's if you want to, but you can check me out on Twitter. We have our podcast is called Unacceptable. We're on all the platforms. You can also check us out at patreon.com/unacceptablepodcast.
You have some really great. I mean, so you mentioned you had Ben Norden and sorry, I've now forgotten her name twice. You had a guest who's Egyptian.
Yes, yeah, Nahal. She's wonderful.
She's great. Yeah, so that was a very recent episode, right? Was that like one ago? I've got to say, I've taken a lot of my like old podcasts out of rotation, and I'm replacing them with new ones. It's been great. So Unacceptable is like very high in my rotation these days.
Love it.
Thought Topics is high in my rotation. We are we're breaking with the podcast bourgeoisie, and we're going back to proletarian podcasts with reasonable listener bases.
Excellent. Well, if anyone can get John Frusciante on our podcast,
we will not rest until we get this.
We emailed Joe Rogan, but
hell yeah,
Ken emailed him, and it was like the most poorly written email, and it was just like, "Hey, I have a podcast." The subject line was like, "Come on my podcast."
Honestly, as someone who reads a podcast email account, that's not the weirdest account. That's like the weirdest email he got that minute, I suspect.
I'm glad to know. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, if you guys check out the pod.
Check out Unacceptable. It is very good. It's solid analysis and it's kind of whimsical in an excellent way. in the best way.
Two weirdo West Coast musicians. And then Twitter, I'm @sedcontra_.
We'll link that in the episode description for sure. And you've got something coming out for Twink Rev real soon, as soon as I stop being slack. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, don't worry. I took so long to write it too. I've just been super slacking, and I'm in 2 reading groups too, so I just like get all these readings done last minute.
Oh, well, wait. We've got something left on there. We've got time left on the SD card. So what are you reading in the reading groups? I must know.
So I'm in 2 reading groups. I'm in one that's a Black political thought, which is really cool. It was organized by one of my friends who is like a Black political theorist at Harvard. She's really fucking smart. She also does data science. And so right now I'm reading Malcolm X. We just been reading all these really rad Black socialists. So we read Kwame Ture, Audre Lorde. And then the other one is like kind of normie, don't judge me. It's we're reading the essays. Yeah. We're reading the essays by Montaigne and Pascal.
Wow. Okay.
So just like some French political theory.
Yeah. It's wild.
I don't know
what you're doing in quarantine. I got tomatoes. Well, so.
That's probably better because you can at least eat tomatoes. I don't know what I can do with like Renaissance French theorists, but.
All right. Mila Ghorayeb, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate you coming on.